Going live in 10 seconds.
Have the attendees been vetted? No, they're not. Oh.
Panelists, I'm letting the attendees in now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 5 and the final day of ODR week. We'll wait for a couple of minutes for everyone to tune in and then we'll start. Nice, the numbers are coming in. People are logging in. Okay, I think we can start now. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to day 5 of ODR week. This is the last and final day of this year's ODR week, and we're very excited for the panel and Shloka, for the panel and for Shloka that we both have, that we have here. Sorry for that. I have no idea what happened. And so over the last 4 days, we've heard different perspectives. We've seen members of the judiciary be here. We've had member secretary of NALSA on day 1. We had businesses play a role. We had ODR entrepreneurs. We heard from practitioners. We've heard from such a diverse field of people. And we can all see that to move and to advance the ODR ecosystem, we can all play a role. So we start off today with understanding how do we advance the ODR ecosystem? What are the learnings that we can have to build this movement in India today? And for that, we have Shloka Nath. Shloka is the Executive Director of India Climate Collaborative. She also leads the sustainability portfolio at Tata Trust and looks at the climate, energy, and environment work in Tata Trust. Now, you may wonder why climate in ODR, but all of them are actually quite similar, right? Like, how do you make climate a priority issue? How do we make ODR a priority issue? Who are the different kind of stakeholders in climate? What can we learn from that for ODR? And I don't want to take too much time, and I'm sure Shloka will cover a lot of those as well. So Shloka, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Agami for inviting me to speak with you today. Thanks, Kirtana. I suspect it's been a long 5 days, but thank you for that introduction. It's a great honor and a wonderful opportunity to share with all of you some measure of our journey in building the India Climate Collaborative. So as Kirtana mentioned, my name is Shloka Nath. I'm the head of sustainability and policy and advocacy at the Tata Trusts, which is one of India's oldest and largest social philanthropic organizations. I'm also the acting director of the India Climate Collaborative, and that's an India-led platform of over 30 Indian and international donors. And we have over 100 technical partners. And all of these represent the Indian and the global climate ecosystem. So a few years ago, when I first came on board to build out the climate change vertical at the Tata Trusts, one imperative became fairly clear fairly quickly, that to build the Indian climate ecosystem specifically, how we might galvanize Indian domestic funders to act on climate change. And at the time, climate-focused philanthropic funding in India was very low, only a tiny fraction of the total philanthropic funding in the country. And the Indian climate movement really lacked the support and involvement of Indian philanthropy. So building a movement, any movement, really requires a collective approach. And in the case of the climate movement, the efforts on climate change were uncoordinated. Individual philanthropies were at different places in their climate journey, and learnings were really unevenly distributed. So the ICC was created essentially to really enable a broad-based, collective, coordinated climate action. We believe in the power of many. We believe that if you're going to move from the act of giving to solving, then philanthropy can no longer be a solitary activity. And so with this in mind, the ICC works at the nexus of business, government, research, and civil society, using philanthropy as a conduit to enable action. At our heart, the ICC was built to increase funding and engagement to the climate space in India from domestic funders. And how do we do this? We play a really unique role as a convener and a connector. Our platform allows us to expand dialogue and collaboration between different climate actors. Since collaboration is so critical to our mission, we actually create opportunities for our networks of partners and other organizations we know to come to the same table. We also landscape the sector to drive attention and resources. We use our vantage point to identify trends in the sector, to reduce duplication, to grow underinvested sectors and organizations. And perhaps the most important, we use our platform to elevate climate actors. Collaboration can amplify existing voices and develop future leaders to tell the story of India through the lens of Indian institutions, individuals, and communities. In any ecosystem, be it with climate actors or various players in ODR, collaboration eliminates competing priorities because you begin to share your vision and your commitment with those with a common goal. And in that process, you become more cost effective. In the case of climate actors, you have adaptation efforts which need to be bigger than climate risks. But unfortunately, the reality is right now that they are not, which means we have a tremendous opportunity to collectively tip the scales. And this is where the India Climate Collaborative was born, to create an inclusive community that doesn't think climate change is someone else's problem. And that in its core is the essence of collaboration, one for all for one. But I think really today, what I want to do is talk about what went into building a collaborative and a movement around the climate emergency. Our work in building the ICC was to help domestic funders realize the power of who they already are and of coming together. So we realized that each and every actor in building a movement must be a ripple that creates a wider ripple so that ultimately we can together bring about a sea of positive change. And we are articulating it each and every day and hoping to build an entire future on it. So the secret sauce, it has a number of ingredients, most important of which is the momentous confluence of time and possibilities. The time is now, more so than it has ever been. There is a confluence of opportunity, capability, and reputation for funders in the climate sector, just as that exists for ODR at this moment, which makes it the perfect time to take a quantum leap forward. And this is the time to tell the world who you are. So what are some of the ingredients that helped us grow? Early on, we tried to identify allies and influencers in the climate and funder community to find those people who give to allied spaces, or perhaps most interestingly, those who believe in the power of strategic, not intuitive philanthropy, and we let them be the first converts. So perhaps most importantly, we really let this community of early adopters feel enough ownership and investment in the initial journey and early years that climate becomes a natural part of their vocabulary and vision. And so the ripple effect began to grow. Ingredient number two was, and maybe I can really call this a frame, was to try and identify as early as possible the gaps in the climate narrative. And this is what I would say ODR should do as well. What are those gaps in ODR's narrative? We recognized early on that the gap for Indian funders in a developing market was perhaps different from the one in the US. In the US, there's a competing lobby of climate deniers. In India, almost no one denies climate change, but almost everyone recognizes that there are competing priorities. What people don't realize is that the devastating impacts of climate change can essentially render their other work meaningless. This is what Bill Gates realized when he started moving his energy from health to climate. And so it's been the same for the ICC. We needed to make that elemental connection between what our donors care about with climate. We needed to connect climate to the end beneficiaries and help see how impacts on gender, on education, and on health were deeply linked to climate. So what are the potential narrative gaps in ODR? Who are the set of trusted technical partners who can identify them? It's imperative to bring these partners together and have them agree on the same path. Ingredient number three, we invested in building trust across the collective. So this meant building a safe space for shared knowledge, ensuring peer-to-peer learning, which in turn has really allowed us to prevent wasted resources and duplication of efforts. It's enormously disorienting to simply say, I don't know, but infinitely more rewarding to believe we can figure this out together. It's allowed us to take comfort in being generalists who could keep the specialists on tap, not on top. And it's been famously said that decisions were made by those who showed up. So we did, we showed up. The power of the collective allowed us that flexibility. It gave us the psychological safety we needed to understand rather than to be right. And this means changing your mind about a topic, an ideology, or above all, yourself. Ingredient number 4, expect anything worthwhile to take some time. Something so fundamental, yet so impatiently overlooked in our culture of immediacy. The myth of the overnight success is just that, a myth. There have been hours and days where we have felt that we hit wall after wall. Behavior isn't easy to change, and there is no way to circumvent the process of experimenting, learning, iterating. Try to speak to as many people who may have tried similar initiatives. Look at sectors like marketing, design thinking to draw inspiration and to bring it back to your own context. There are no magic answers. It's a process of chipping away and often going back to the drawing board. In these times, remind yourself that the flower doesn't go from bud to blossom in one sprightly burst. But that's where all the real magic unfolds, in the tedium of the blossoming, in the making of our collective character and destiny. Ingredient number 5, be amenable to change, to be comfortable with being a continuous work in progress. In landscapes where the political and regulatory regime is unstable, and at times when the role of civil society is changing, organizations like the ICC, movements like ODR, they have the implicit mandate to move and shift domestic funding to the needs on the ground. Between 2015 to 2018, nearly 15,000 licenses for nonprofits to receive international funding were cancelled. As recently as earlier this year, there have been more restrictions. Domestic funders need to pick up the mantle to support and scale the nonprofit sector, and in our case, climate mitigation, which they have so far largely stayed away from. The ICC is now a network of 30 plus funders, and as I mentioned, over 100 technical partners. So organizations like ours must then use the power of the collective to slowly pivot and steer that immense ship that is the climate ecosystem. Ingredient number 6, individual leadership is important, but make it collaborative. In the old world of silos and solo players, leaders had access to everything they needed under one roof, and a command and control style served them well. But things have changed. The world has become much more interconnected, and if leaders don't know how to tap into the power of these connections, they'll be left behind. Leaders today must be able to harness ideas, people, and resources from across boundaries of all kinds. Differences in convictions, in cultural values, operating norms, inevitably add complexity to collaborative efforts, but they also make them much richer. Getting that value is the heart of collaborative leadership. When the challenge is as complex as changing the dispute resolution format for the country, it can be overwhelming trying to figure out where to start, how each of us fits into that solution. But the fact that everyone in their individual capacities can contribute to bringing this change is an important place to begin. You can change the status quo on the basis of your ability to impact, influence, and inspire others. So be a connector. Ingredient number 7, and this is the last one, embrace conflict. At the level of a society, disputes are inevitable. We tend to underestimate not only the inevitability of conflict, but also, and this is key, its importance to creating a movement. The disagreements sparked by differences in perspective and competencies, access to information, and strategic focus within a movement actually generate much of the value that can come from collaboration across boundaries. Clashes between parties are the crucibles in which creative solutions are developed, and wise trade-offs amongst competing objectives are made. So instead of simply trying to reduce disagreements, we need to embrace conflict, and just as important, institutionalize mechanisms for managing it. We are facing a crisis of leadership in our country and across the globe, where ruling parties have realized that narrative dominance is a very important asset in politics. Our collective voice is a necessary force in expanding the space of civil society in our respective sectors. Collaboration is the lighthouse to shift conversations, to bring people together in a direction towards positive change. And this is the regeneration which has to take root in civil society. There is nothing more difficult yet more gratifying in our society than living with sincerity and acting from a place of large-hearted, constructive, rational faith in the human spirit, continually bending towards growth and betterment. This remains the most potent antidote to cynicism. Today, especially, we see the ICC, movements like ODR, and collaboration as an act of courage and resistance. This is your moment in history. Don't let it pass you by. When the history of the ODR movement in India comes to be written, you will look back and you will say, that was a historic moment. I was part of it. I was there. We did it together. So let me sign off by saying ICC is simply a call away. Do reach out to us for ideas and support. That's what we're here for. Thank you and congratulations to all of you and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was so incredibly said and so well put, all the insights that you've shared. And I think everything stands out. And some of the things that most stand out to me are the need for collaborative leadership, which is also what we've been seeing with people talking on autonomy groups in the last 2 years, the network coming together, people working with each other. We've also seen how do we tell the story differently, right? So is ODR only for financial disputes? Is it only for small value disputes? Is it only for this? And for us to recognize that it's a muscle that we should build to resolve all kinds of disputes can be resolved, all kinds of conflict can be resolved outside of courts if we choose to do so. And it's actually a great segue for me to also introduce Tara, Ollapally, and go into the next session, because we're here in this session looking at ODR for all. How do we look at ODR for, say, say we have Santosh ji from Aajeevika Bureau. He'll talk about applying principles of ODR to resolve migrant worker disputes. Krishna will talk about the capacity that we need to be able to resolve these disputes. Kudrat will talk about the youth power and youth collective. So how do we look at the larger thing? How can people reclaim the power that they can have to be able to resolve disputes and manage conflicts? So Tara is the co-founder of CAMP and Uncommon Ground. She also works with Uncommon Ground. She's been a huge proponent of mediation for many years now and a really close Agami network member as well. Tara, over to you.
Thank you, Kirtana. Thank you so much, Shloka. That was so beautifully articulated and kind of captures the journey of ADR and ODR in India over the past 10 years. And so much to learn from. Collaboration is key. And it's so exciting that we, through Agami, are able to bring together the diverse players of the ADR movement to actually collaboratively work on creating that change in our justice system. So thank you so much for that wonderful frame. And today I'm really excited to engage in this conversation. Over the past week, we have been speaking about the innovative ways that ODR is being used in the framework of more traditional civil commercial disputes. And today's conversation is about being able to understand how this process and players in this field are taking this beyond the traditional norms of civil and commercial disputes. We have a wonderful group starting with Santosh, Poonia from Aajeevika Bureau. A lot of us know the wonderful work that Aajeevika Bureau is doing with migrant workers. So we'll hear how Aajeevika Bureau
Hello.
Hi, Santosh ji.
Sorry, I have lost your voice.
Yes, sorry. I think I had an internet glitch.
Yeah. Can you repeat, please?
Yes, I had an internet glitch. I'm back on.
No problem.
And so I was just introducing Kudrat and the work that she does with youth. And finally, we also have Krishna, my colleague and partner in crime with Uncommon Ground. Again, a very pioneering initiative by the Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies and CAMP to build the social muscle of collaboration. So without further ado, we don't have much time here. I'm going to try and bring out the stories of each of our panelists, starting with you, Santosh ji. Aajeevika Bureau has been working with migrant workers for the past, since 2004, and you lead the legal aid and legal literacy vertical. You've used mediation, and you've said this numerous times, how you use mediation as an effective tool to find resolution for our migrant workers. Can you help us understand a little bit more why mediation? Why is mediation, as much as possible, the tool that you use to find solutions for our migrant workers?
Okay, thank you, Tara and Agami, for hosting the good panel and discussion. Please allow me speak in Hindi.
Absolutely.
या थैंक यू। तो दो तीन चीजें हैं, जैसे हमने आजीविका ब्यूरो ने वी आर वर्किंग विद माइग्रेंट वर्कर में, 1 मिनट लूंगा थोड़ा सा इंट्रोड्यूस करने के लिए हमारे काम और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को। हमने 2004 में काम करना स्टार्ट किया था माइग्रेंट वर्कर और उनके इश्यूज पे, और बहुत अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं थी, कुछ बेसिक आइडियाज थे अबाउट आइडेंटिटी एंड स्किल, उनसे स्टार्ट किया था। बट कुछ 4-5 साल के बाद समझ में आया कि वर्कर्स के कुछ और भी इश्यूज हैं, और वो इश्यूज हैं वो काफी उनके बेसिक राइट से जुड़े हुए हैं कि उनको जहाँ काम कर रहे हैं, बिकॉज दे आर अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेक्टर वर्कर्स, जहाँ पे वो काम कर रहे हैं किस तरह के लेबर लॉज हैं वो प्रोविजंस नहीं पता है, अगर उनके साथ कोई चीटिंग होती है या कुछ भी होता है तो कहाँ पे उनको कंप्लेंट करना है, उसका प्रोसेस क्या है उसके बारे में नहीं पता है। तो ये समझने में हमें थोड़ा 3 से 4 साल का टाइम लग गया। We have started work on legal service about 2009, और हमने ये कुछ इश्यूज जब सामने आने लगे, लोग कहते थे हम काम करते हैं पैसा नहीं मिलता, तब हमारे दिमाग में एक सवाल क्लिक हुआ कि यार पैसा नहीं मिलता मतलब लोग माइग्रेट ही पैसे के लिए कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि यहाँ पे काम नहीं है, क्योंकि यहाँ पे उनके पास कुछ और लाइवलीहुड का ऑप्शन नहीं है। अगर वही नहीं मिले तो फिर दूसरा तो कोई और सर्विस के बारे में बात ही क्या करेंगे। तो उसको थोड़ा और डीपली समझने लगे, तो हमने उस पर थोड़ा रेस्पॉन्ड करना स्टार्ट किया। एंड उसके साथ साथ ही जब हमने पहले जो कुछ केसेस आए थे इनिशियल टाइम में, उनको हमने लगा जैसे बहुत सिंपल वो होता है कि लेबर लॉज है, 44 लेबर लॉज है, इतने आइडियल लेबर लॉज है इंडिया के बारे में जैसे बात की जाती है, बहुत अच्छे लेबर लॉज है। तो हमने जैसे केस आया उसके कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट इकट्ठे किए, बात किया, एडवोकेट के पास गए, कोर्ट में फाइल कर दिया। पता चला कि कोर्ट में फाइल नहीं हो सकता क्योंकि ये काम तो कोई बाहर किया हुआ है उसने, वो माइग्रेंट वर्कर है। 2-3 चीजें जैसे आपने जो सवाल किया उसमें बताऊंगा कि क्यों हमने मीडिएशन को चूज किया, मतलब वो एक तरह का ऑप्शन क्यों हमने चूज किया। तो पहली चीज तो यह है कि लेबर लॉज में पेमेंट ऑफ वेजेज, मिनिमम वेजेज, ग्रेचुटी और भी जो लेबर लॉजेज है उनमें प्रॉब्लम ये था कि सबसे बड़ी चीज ये थी कि आप जहाँ पे काम कर रहे हैं, आपका वर्क प्लेस जहाँ पे है, आप वहीं पे केस फाइल कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज उसका जुरिडिक्शन वही होता है। आप जब भी माइग्रेंट वर्कर के लिए प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है, जैसे उसके साथ बेस रिलेटेड या कोई ऐसा डिस्प्यूट होता है तो वो वापस आ जाता है, तो उसके पास पैसा नहीं है, उसके हाथ में पैसा नहीं है, तो वो अपने यहाँ पे आके वो जो केस है उसको फाइल नहीं कर सकता है। पहली चीज तो ये थी। दूसरा ये है उसके पास कोई भी डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं है, कुछ भी रिटर्न एग्रीमेंट नहीं है, कुछ रिटर्न में नहीं है। तो जब कोर्ट में जाएगा तो कोर्ट में उससे 10 तरह के डॉक्यूमेंट पूछे जाएंगे, वो उसके पास नहीं है। तो जब हमने लिटिगेशन का प्रोसेस स्टार्ट किया तो पहले तो हमें स्ट्रगल ये हुआ कि कोर्ट में फाइल कैसे करें। जैसे तैसे हमने थोड़ा सा ये बना भी लिया, कुछ और जो वर्बल जो टेस्टिमोनीज थी वो उनके बेसिस पे भी हमने केस को फाइल किया। पता चला उसमें बहुत टाइम लगने वाला है और 10,000 रुपए का केस है जिसमें वर्कर को बार बार आना पड़ रहा है, तो उसके लिए वाइबल ऑप्शन नहीं है। तो इन तीनों चीजों को देखते हुए हमें 1-1.5 साल के बाद ये फील हुआ कि इसमें अगर हम बात दोनों पार्टीज के साथ करें जो इन्वॉल्व है इस डिस्प्यूट में, तो शायद कुछ और भी रियलिटी हो सकती है, क्योंकि जो पावर रिलेशन है वो हमें समझ में आया कि दोनों पार्टीज के बीच में शायद डिस्प्यूट का जो कारण है वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग का और पावर रिलेशन का है, लीगल उतना नहीं है। और लीगल मैटर्स जो है अगर हम वर्कर का साइड लेते हैं तो वो लीगल मैटर भी स्ट्रॉन्ग हो जाएगा। तो ये हमारा कारण था कि हमने इस चीज को किया। दूसरा ये माइग्रेंट वर्कर के साथ एक सोशल नेटवर्क बहुत इन्वॉल्व होता है, और सोशल नेटवर्क में कोई ना कोई पर्सन दे आर अलोंग, जो उनको ले जाने वाले लोग हैं वो उनके आसपास के या उसके जुडिक्शन के लोग हैं, तो उनके साथ बात करना या उनके थ्रू लिंक ढूंढना ज्यादा आसान है रेदर देन कि आप लिटिगेशन में जाओ और कोर्ट के थ्रू ये प्रोसेस को करो। वो बहुत लेंदी भी है, एक्सपेंसिव भी है, और वर्कर के लिए थोड़ा सा वायबल नहीं है।
Okay. So, I mean, clearly it is the fact that our traditional court systems are challenging to find solutions for this sector because of jurisdictional issues, because of the fact that documentation is difficult to find for our migrant workers, and because of the power differences. The traditional court systems are difficult, is a difficult point of access for our migrant workers, which is why Aajeevika Bureau was able to use the informal collaborative processes that we have through mediation to be able to strike the balance, access the employers in a more effective way to be able to find real resolutions for our migrant workers. Thank you so much for that, Santoshji. To now move to Kudrat to help understand again how are different players in this larger ADR ecosystem working. Kudrat started off her career as a disputes lawyer at a large law firm. And today she's the founder of an organization called YCM, Youth Conflict Management and Mediation Initiative. Help us understand, Kudrat, what YCM is and why you embarked on this journey to move from a traditional law firm practice to YCM.
Thank you, Tara, and thanks to Agami for giving YCM this opportunity to share our story. So to quickly answer your question, Tara, if in one line I had to answer that, I had a professional change of heart from dispute resolution to dispute prevention. Now, let me explain that a little bit further. After law school, joining one of the top law firms like Khaitan was great because it gives you an exposure to the entire dispute resolution system of the country. And you get to be a part of these landmark judgments. To be honest, I did enjoy and get a kick out of, arguing before the Supreme Court on a lot of amendments in the Arbitration Act and supporting development of jurisprudence there. But soon I realized that my clients were still not satisfied. They felt they were getting stuck in this cycle of disputes where at every stage in the dispute resolution system, they were losing power and control over the outcome of their dispute. And then I asked myself a question, what would be a process which would be more party-centric? And I was quick to jump to mediation as the answer. And then I began to research on mediation, did my master's in mediation, got trained as a mediator in London, worked with different mediation organizations and mediators, sadly to realize that mediation was also failing in India. So what seemed to be the solution was actually also failing. So then I moved to the next question, why is mediation failing in India? And you will see scholars, practitioners, all are quick to attribute the reason to lack of awareness, lack of legislative recognition, lack of backing from the state. But I had this feeling that there's something more fundamental at the bottom of this. Even after we have a law for mediation in India, or even after we have the backing of the state, mediation could still fail. And the reason for that was only one thing, which is norms of our dispute resolution culture. So I identified 4 norms. And if I could just quickly share my screen to give a visual picture to our audience here. Yes. So norm number 1, we are conditioned to depend on others to tell us who's right, who's wrong, right from when we grow up as a child to a very educated citizen who knows his or her legal rights. We're still conditioned to go to a judicial system to understand, am I right or am I wrong? So we don't take ownership of our disputes. Problem number 2, we are quick to say that, okay, this is the problem of the state. This is the problem of the lawyers. If the dispute resolution system is not effective, if mediation is not working well, these trained professionals need to do something about it. We as citizens demand change. But what about becoming the change we want to see? Problem number 3, we surrender our power over our disputes and conflicts to third parties. It could be the state, it could be ADR neutrals, as opposed to effectively taking support of these systems. So there's a thin line between that. Of course, the state is responsible to provide access to justice to everybody, but there's a thin line between you as a citizen using the systems of the state as opposed to completely surrendering your power. And problem number 4, the most troubling problem is we're conditioned to suppress our conflicts as opposed to address, until and unless it becomes a serious dispute, unless it becomes a legal dispute in the eyes of the system. What about early detection of conflicts and disagreements that Shloka was referring to? Are we in a culture where we embrace conflicts? So the answers to all these questions were no. And that's where YCM came in. And we realized that these 4 problems are not just the reason behind why mediation is failing. It's also the reason behind why there's so much of dissatisfaction with the entire dispute resolution system of the country as a whole. So to change that, YCM was found with 3 main goals. We wanted to facilitate a journey for citizens from self-awareness to self-empowerment. So we are doing this in 3 ways. First, we focus on conflict management skills for empowering citizens to deal with inevitable conflicts in every domain of life. We are training youth as conflict managers and mediators to build India's first youth network for dispute resolution. And lastly, we are collectivizing the power of the youth to set up youth-run centers for providing conflict management and community mediation services across India.
Fantastic. The idea that there is a focused effort on building the knowledge and skill of our youth to understand and respond to conflict is hugely empowering. As was mentioned earlier, conflict is inevitable. It can be a force of change if we know how to manage conflict better. So that's absolutely fantastic. And brings me to Krishna. We've had many a conversation on this very same point. Krishna leads the Uncommon Ground project, which is a co-curated project between CAMP and the Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies. And Krishna is a lawyer by training, a business school professor by experience, and now leads Uncommon Ground. So Krishna, what made you invest in the Uncommon Ground initiative?
Hello and namaste, everyone. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, the entire team at Agami, for having me here today for this amazing conversation. And Tara, I have to thank you for, making that question a bit personal, because that allows me to tell an interesting story. And also because that way I don't have to pretend to add on much to the amazing points that Santosh and Kudrat have already been making about the need of the hour today. So I was originally a lawyer by profession, ran away from the law basically because I could not handle the adversarial nature of it. And cutting a long story short, I spent many years trying to find answers in various places, including a business school where I did my PhD in business government society relationships, trying to figure out some ways in which to change the world. And I returned to India just about a year ago after living overseas for nearly 20 years, and which is serendipitously when Tara approached me with the whole discussion on the giving a new form to the Uncommon Ground vision that Rohini had pioneered about 10, 12 years ago. And well, let me be honest and share with you all that my first reaction was, "Ye kabhi nahi ho sakta hai." And I promise you, that was one of my first reactions. And I was like, "Ye kabhi nahi ho sakta hai." And the reason for that is I remember still that I came home that day and I live right in front of a government housing colony where, just as I was thinking about this idea that had been put forth, this amazingly beautiful idea, which I was convinced is, I don't know how anyone is going to make it work. And I see all these women lined up with their, colorful plastic buckets and everything to fill water at, one of those community water pipes that you have on the streets. And I remember looking at them, and that's about the same time that somebody in sort of the building WhatsApp group made a comment about, so much noise, so much disturbance. People like these can't ever deal with their problems. And I think that was the moment for me when I truly, truly saw the potential and merit in the idea that Uncommon Ground was trying to become, of being a societal muscle, of taking away from this entire idea that in order to deal with problems or conflict situations, you always need a specialized skill set. No, it's about needing a perspective, an attitude, a sense of empowerment to be able to engage with a polarized situation, a power differential situation, a variety of situations that complicate the whole matter. And to be able, and that's when Uncommon Ground, I think, fell into place, not as an idea, but as a passion for me, where it became that opportunity to say, right, what if we take this whole thing out there? What if it's no longer just about propping up systems of conflict resolution, which are very, very important, but what if we can go that one step in a slightly different direction to say, let us build this capability in society as a whole. Let us build this as a muscle. Let us build this at various levels where people are able to use it to take decisions that allow for mobilization, self-determination, conflict avoidance, conflict resolution, many things that can be called, and it can be called and are a part and parcel of it. But what if we are able to disperse and democratize this very, very important way of looking at something, important way of dealing with a situation? And I think that is sort of the day I threw in my hat with Uncommon Ground. And of course, Tara and everyone else has been stuck with me ever since.
Absolutely amazing. And I think that's the soul of it, the ability where tomorrow, when somebody proposes, let's talk about this, it's not seen as a sign of weakness. It's not seen as there's a hidden intention over here, as much as this is the smarter, wiser thing to do as a society to deal with something as inevitable as conflict. So thank you for that, Krishna. I'm going to go back to Santosh ji at this point to help us dive in a little bit more on the reality of the past year. We've all seen the tremendous impact, especially on our migrant workers, and the lockdown, non-payment of wages, intense situations that our migrant workers were faced with. How did you, Santosh ji, and Aajeevika Bureau leverage the power of technology, which was beginning to find its space in our larger ADR conversation? How did you use technology to be able to work in the situation of the lockdown to find solutions for our migrant workers?
Okay. तो जैसे हम कह रहे हैं कि ये एक तो जैसे मैंने बताया आपको कि पहले एक चीज तो ये है कि हम माइग्रेंट वर्कर के साथ जब काम कर रहे थे तो हमने पहले स्टार्ट किया था फिजिकली मीडिएशन को, एंड आफ्टर 2 ईयर इन अगस्त 2011 हमने एक हेल्पलाइन की शुरुआत की, और वो इस अंडरस्टैंडिंग के साथ में कि ये जो इश्यूज हैं वो सिर्फ उस एरिया में नहीं है जहाँ पे हमारे ऑपरेशनल एरिया है, जहाँ पे हमारी फिजिकल प्रेजेंस है, ये इश्यूज तो और भी जगह है, तो क्या हम इसको थोड़ा सा लॉन्ग डिस्टेंस या ऑनलाइन सर्विसेज भी प्रोवाइड करा सकते हैं क्या? तो उस अंडरस्टैंडिंग से स्टार्ट की। पहले 3-4 साल थोड़े से स्लो मूवमेंट में हम चले और कुछ ऐसे 8 to 10 डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स जहाँ पे हम काम कर रहे थे वहाँ पे हुआ। इन 2015 हमने राजस्थान गवर्नमेंट के सामने जब हमारा आइडिया प्रेजेंट किया, और दैट टाइम वी हैव रिजॉल्व्ड अबाउट 5000 केसेस थ्रू हेल्पलाइन और फिजिकल जो हमारा मेडिएशन सिस्टम था। तो राजस्थान गवर्नमेंट को ये आइडिया अच्छा लगा एंड वी हैव कोलैबोरेटेड विद देम, और उनके साथ जब हमने स्टार्ट किया तो इसका रीच जो है पूरे राजस्थान में हो गया, सभी डिस्ट्रिक्ट में हो गया। और हमें जो एक अच्छी चीज है, हमें लेबर डिपार्टमेंट का एक अच्छा सपोर्ट मिला, जहाँ पे भी डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेबर डिपार्टमेंट्स थे वो सब सपोर्ट कर रहे थे। लेबर हेल्पलाइन फिर एक फाइनली मतलब एक तरह का फॉर्मल एक राजस्थान गवर्नमेंट का और आजीविका ब्यूरो का एक जॉइंट एंटिटी था जो फॉर्मल डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन सिस्टम को डील कर रहा था। तो उस चीज से हमने शुरुआत की और हमारे पास फिर जो ट्रैफिक था वो अबाउट 4 to 5 टाइम बढ़ गया। जैसे लास्ट ईयर की बात करें तो हम वी आर नॉट रेडी, मतलब जैसे मैं कहता हूँ और आगामी के हर प्लेटफॉर्म पे मैं कहता रहा हूँ कि हम जिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी के साथ काम करते हैं दे आर वेरी मतलब जो बहुत कम पढ़े लिखे हैं या कम बिल्कुल पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं, आधे से ज्यादा लोग हैं जो स्मार्टफोन यूज नहीं करते हैं, तो टेक्नोलॉजी उनके लिए उतना फ्रेंडली नहीं है। तो हम थोड़ा सा हाइब्रिड मॉडल को हम यूज करते हैं जिसमें ODR प्लस कुछ ऐसा सपोर्ट इन काउंसलिंग सिस्टम जहाँ पे हम फिजिकल प्रेजेंस के साथ हम काम कर सकते हैं। बट जो लॉकडाउन है उसने हमें अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं दी और वो प्रिपरेशन का टाइम भी नहीं दिया। तो हमने इमीडिएटली ये देखा कि हमने 5-6 साल में जो हमने सीखा है, जो हम वर्कर्स को फोन पे जो सपोर्ट प्रोवाइड करा रहे थे, उसमें अभी का जो करंट जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, वो कैसे यूज हो सकता है। तो हमने एक व्हाट्सएप नंबर को इमीडिएटली पब्लिश किया और उसके साथ साथ ही हमने ईमेल को भी थोड़ा सा पब्लिश किया और लोगों को थोड़ा हेल्प करते हुए कि आप रिकॉर्ड कर दो, फोन से रिकॉर्ड कर दो, आप वॉइस रिकॉर्डिंग भेज दीजिए, आप जो भी एविडेंस है उनका फोटो खींच के भेज दीजिए। जो लोग थोड़े पढ़े लिखे थे या किसी की हेल्प लेके ईमेल भेज सकते थे, तो वो हमने स्टार्ट किया और एम्प्लॉयर के साथ हमने फिर ये स्टार्ट किया। दूसरी चीज ये भी हुआ लॉकडाउन के पीरियड में, ये भी हुआ जो मैं मतलब थोड़ा हमारे लिए लर्निंग भी था। उससे पहले हमें लगता था कि ये जो इश्यूज है मोस्टली वो सिर्फ अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेक्टर वर्कर्स के साथ है, बट हमें पता चला जो ऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेक्टर वर्कर्स है दे आर also very fragile, working very fragile system। उनके भी जो जॉब सिक्योरिटी है वो कुछ भी नहीं है। जहाँ पे 3 महीने का नोटिस पीरियड था, उसको इमीडिएटली एक रात पहले एक ईमेल से या व्हाट्सएप मैसेज से बता दिया गया था कि आपको कल से रिट्रेंच किया जा रहा है, वी आर नॉट एबल टू पे योर सैलरी। तो ये हमें थोड़ा समझ में आया और ऐसे लोगों ने फिर थोड़ा सा टेक्नोलॉजी को भी यूज किया और हमने थोड़ा उन लोगों को रिक्वेस्ट भी किया कि और भी आसपास के जो लोग हैं, जो लोग ईमेल नहीं कर सकते, जो लोग व्हाट्सएप को यूज नहीं कर सकते, उनकी हेल्प करें। तो वी हैव रिसीव्ड थाउजेंड्स ऑफ कॉल्स। मतलब अगर मैं ये कहूँ कि सिर्फ हमें 2 महीने का मतलब पीक टाइम जो हम मानते हैं वो 24 मार्च से लेके जून 30 तक का हम पीक टाइम मानते हैं। उस टाइम में सिर्फ हमने 60,000 कॉल्स अटेंड किए थे हमारे लेबर हेल्पलाइन पे, और वो टोटली मतलब जहाँ पे हमारी फिजिकल प्रेजेंस नहीं थी, जहाँ पे हम सिर्फ लोगों को रेस्पॉन्ड कर रहे थे उस टाइम पे। और मोस्ट ऑफ कॉल्स आर हेल्प रिलेटेड काफी थे उसमें, बट बहुत सारे कॉल्स थे जो MHA के गाइडलाइन होने के बावजूद भी उनको रिट्रेंच किया जा रहा था। लॉकडाउन पीरियड का जो बेजेज है उनको डिटेक्ट किया जा रहा था। इस तरह के कॉल्स थे जिनमें हम इंटरवीन कर रहे थे। तो हमने ना थोड़ा सा जो बहुत बेसिक टेक्नोलॉजी है, व्हाट्सएप के थ्रू आप डॉक्यूमेंट्स को शेयर कर सकते हो, ईमेल से आप अपनी प्रॉब्लम शेयर कर सकते हो, तो वो उस चीज को हमने काफी यूज किया और हमें काफी सक्सेस मिला उसमें। सिर्फ मैं 2 महीने की बात करूं, सिर्फ अप्रैल मई का, तो हमें अबाउट 1700 केसेस हमने उस टाइम पे रिकॉर्ड किए थे हमारे सिस्टम में। नॉर्मली हमें 150 to 200 केसेस पर मंथ आते हैं, जो उससे 4 से 5 गुना ज्यादा थे। और हमें मतलब जो सक्सेस रेट था हमारा वो भी काफी अच्छा रहा। 1.35 करोड़ रुपए ऐसा है जो हमने सिर्फ इस टाइम में वर्कर को पेमेंट कराया। तो ये मॉनेटरी बेनिफिट है। इसके साथ साथ जो दूसरा बेनिफिट था वो था रीस्टेट ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट, जहाँ पे हम नेगोशिएट कर रहे थे लोगों को, जो रिट्रेंच कर दिया था उनको, अनलॉफुल रिट्रेंचमेंट था, उसको जो रीस्टेट कराया, वो नंबर भी काफी बड़ा।
Wow. So in this short period of between March to May, clearly there was a huge amount of distress.
March and April and May.
Yeah, huge amount of distress in the increased of phone calls, but you were able to use technology, WhatsApp, emails, phone calls, to be able to register 1,700 cases and find repayment of up to 1.34 crores. All that was done online. I understand that you had started the process of going online, offline, but with the lockdown, it all went
online, mostly online,
completely online, and you were able to find this kind of incredible relief to our workers. And you were also able to address issues of termination online, accessing the employers and representing our migrant workers with our employers, again, using online technologies.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic story to be able to share and be able to understand how the power of ODR has been able to greatly support this sector. Kudrat, as you work with our youth, curious to understand how our youth are responding to these ideas of collaboration when it comes to conflict. The intuitive response when it comes to a conflict is to strike. It's not necessarily to dialogue. But as these ideas are being shared with our youth, how are they responding to dialogue and collaboration when it comes to conflict situations?
So thank you so much for that question. Like you said, that the first intuitive reaction is to strike. So at YCM, we are following a different model of self to society by creating and acknowledging conflicts at every level. So just to share a story from our center and our training happening at OP Jindal Global University, we have youth from the university from diverse backgrounds, just not law. We have people from journalism, arts, media, international affairs, and we also have youth from the communities around, right? Someone is a school teacher, someone is a paralegal volunteer, someone is an advocate, someone is an aspiring lawyer, someone is a school student. Everybody is brought together into this one session for this training. And now you have people coming from diverse backgrounds, speaking in different languages. Conflicts are bound to arise. So then how do you deal with this situation, right? So we teach our youth these skills and say, hey, why don't you apply this to this situation that you are going through right now and tell us if it works for you, or what is the outcome that you would have arrived at otherwise. So I feel really happy to share, Tara, from when we had started back in Feb 2020 to now, we have same set of youngsters saying that, look, yes, earlier we said that it would be more efficient to have separate trainings because time is important and doing everything online is becoming tedious. But our need to learn diverse perspectives and to broaden our worldview has increased so much by interacting with people from different parts of the society, of the country, with different viewpoints. And in fact, we also see collaboration has moved to the next level. So like Santosh was mentioning on technology that, communities don't always have access to technology. We have trainees teaching each other how do you use Zoom, how do you create a LinkedIn profile, right? How does a breakout room work? They are coming up with creative ideas where they are doing role plays on real life scenarios, real life conflicts, using Zoom, using breakout rooms, and they play the role of the user of the conflict management service, and also the provider of the conflict management service to get this holistic picture of what's working, what's not working. So that's where we are at with collaboration.
Fantastic. And so you're seeing our youth open, excited, using ideas of looking at a dispute as differing perspectives, trying to understand where each person is coming from, and actually applying these techniques into their, not only in the situation of the training that they were all thrown into, but also in their individual situations. Fantastic. That's great to hear. Moving on to Krishna. Krishna, we speak about at the Uncommon Ground project about how we want to build this social muscle, this ability of our society to understand and respond to conflict situations differently, collaboratively. From the interactions that you've had with civil society, what is the state of this muscle presently? Or what are you seeing as the state of this muscle presently?
Tara, forgive me for what might be a slightly unpopular opinion, but my take is it's not strong enough. Nowhere near strong enough. But do please allow me to explain why I say that. And I think, some of it also has to do with the language and perspective we come at this from, where, in general, let's say you go to a group of civil society organizations, given our intent, given the nature of our work, it is very likely that we are going to say, hey, we're all on the same page, we're all in this together. But that kind of takes away from the entire value creation potential that any conflict situation inherently has in it. And we don't even need to go so far as calling it a conflict situation. Any situation where dialogue can play a role is a situation that holds immense potential to create value and not just distribute or apportion value by saying, okay, this is how we're all going to agree with each other. And I think sometimes, in fact, your question, you used two words, both the understand and deal. I think we need a lot more work on the understand element of conflict, of the nuances of even the positive potential in conflict, before we move on to that important but slightly one removed step of dealing with full-fledged conflict or even semi-conflict situations. And so where we at Uncommon Ground come from is to be able to say, can we look at conflict as something that holds potential to create values, bring forth new ideas, create solutions instead of just finding solutions that everyone is happy with. And I think it becomes very important, and this was something that was mentioned earlier. In fact, I think both Kudrat also mentioned it more recently, where we were talking about the fact that there is a lot of potential in conflict to be able to use it positively, proactively. And that is where I feel more work can definitely happen. Is it going to happen? Yes. Let me not sound like a wet blanket and say, oh, this is not happening. It's more about it has begun happening, and I very much look forward to being a part of the process of this happening with the kind of players who have gathered here today and who are able to talk about this in such an open and positive manner. But yeah, the work still needs to be done.
Absolutely, and I think that's the exciting part, to hear Kudrat, to hear you say that we're starting at that point where we are able to have those conversations saying conflict is not to be feared. Let's not suppress, let's address. So that's fantastic. Kirtan, I want to check in with you on questions that might be coming for our panelists.
I think the questions, the couple of questions that we have are directed more towards Santosh ji, in terms of many in the unorganized sectors are having issues with EPF and ESI payments. So what is the solution to that, Santosh ji? That's one question.
Okay. तो कीर्तन तारा जी, दोनों चीजों का ही मतलब ऑनलाइन पोर्टल्स हैं, और हम ये सजेस्ट करते हैं लोगों को. मोस्टली हमारे पास जैसे जो इश्यूज आते हैं, हमारे पास भी काफी इश्यूज आते हैं रिगार्डिंग EPF एंड ESIC पेमेंट्स एंड तो दो चीजें सॉरी तो दो चीजें हैं जिनमें हमें जो चाहिए होता है. पहली चीज तो ये है, जो इश्यूज आते हैं वर्कर्स के सामने, वो ये होता है कि उनके पास उनके PF और ESIC के जो क्रेडेंशियल्स हैं वो शेयर नहीं किए जाते. उसकी वजह से प्रॉब्लम होता है, क्योंकि उनमें बहुत पेमेंट के जो रोल है, अब काफी कम रोल कर दिया है एम्प्लॉयर का. अगर उनके पास क्रेडेंशियल्स हैं तो दे आर डायरेक्टली प्रोसेस थ्रू पोर्टल. बट कुछ चीजें हैं जिनमें उनको वेरीफाई कराना पड़ता है, एम्प्लॉयर से वेरीफाई कराना पड़ता है. अगर उनको जैसे इलनेस का बेनिफिट लेना है या एम्प्लॉयमेंट जो स्कीम है ESIC के दोनों जो स्कीम्स हैं उसका बेनिफिट लेना है, तो उनको कुछ प्रोसेस है जो उसको वेरीफाई कराना पड़ता है एम्प्लॉयर से. अगर वो एम्प्लॉयर इजीली वेरीफाई कर देता तो बहुत आसान है. कई चीजें क्या है कि अगर वर्कर के पास ये सारी जानकारी है, उसने अपना लॉगिन आईडी क्रिएट किया हुआ है, तो उसको किसी की जरूरत नहीं होती है, उसके मोबाइल से और उसकी जो क्रेडेंशियल्स है उससे डायरेक्ट वो प्रोसेस कर सकता है। बट हाँ, ये जरूर है कि हमें मतलब जहाँ हमारा बहुत लिमिटेड सा एक्सपीरियंस है कि हम अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर वर्कर से ज्यादा काम करते हैं, बहुत लिमिटेड सा जो सेगमेंट है जो ऑर्गेनाइज वर्कर्स का है, उनमें ये है कि जब कोई डिस्प्यूट अराइज हो जाता है, उसके बाद एम्प्लॉयर थोड़ा सा उसको डिनाई करता है वेरीफाई करने के लिए, और डिपार्टमेंट की वहां पे हमें लगता है कि कोई अथॉरिटी नहीं है। जब हम डिपार्टमेंट को या डिपार्टमेंट ऑफिसर्स को कहते हैं कि ये आपका क्लाइंट है, मतलब आपके यहाँ पर रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है, एम्प्लॉयर को आप कह सकते हो, उसको डायरेक्ट कर सकते हो, नॉट ओनली आस्क बट आप उसको डायरेक्ट कर सकते हो कि उसको उसके यहाँ पे रिकॉर्ड आपका शो कर रहा है, तो आप उसको वेरीफाई करें उसके जो भी रिकॉर्ड्स हैं। तो बट डिपार्टमेंट बहुत सपोर्ट नहीं करता है, और उसमें वर्कर्स के लिए और हमारे लिए भी बड़ी इस तरह की स्थिति खड़ी हो जाती है। तो उसके लिए थोड़े से कुछ चेंजेस की जरूरत है डेफिनेटली, जहाँ पे अगर रिकॉर्ड में शो कर रहा है, जहाँ ऑनलाइन रिकॉर्ड है, वहां पे एम्प्लॉयर के वेरिफिकेशन की रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं होनी चाहिए। बट हाँ, मोस्टली मतलब ये हो जाता है, 80-90% में कोई बहुत प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती है, 10-50% वर्कर में प्रॉब्लम होती है, जहाँ पे एम्प्लॉयर वेरीफाई नहीं करता है, उन चीजों में थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है। बट हाँ, अगर उनके पास क्रेडेंशियल्स है, मैं जो अगर इसमें कहना चाहूंगा, दो ही चीज है, जब आपका डिडक्शन हो रहा है क्योंकि आपकी वो सैलरी स्लिप में शो होता है, तभी आप अपने क्रेडेंशियल्स मांग लें, आप अपना यूएन आईडी मांग लें, अपना ईएसआईसी का स्लिप मांग लें, ये सब चीज, ईएसआईसी का कार्ड आपका बना होना चाहिए, ये सारी चीजें आपके पास होंगी, तो एम्प्लॉयर के ऊपर डिपेंडेंसी थोड़ी सी कम हो जाती है।
Thank you, Santosh ji.
And I think that actually well answers the question that I had on what are the ways that we could strengthen the use of ADR within this community. So for the larger ecosystem, working on ways to be able to make these processes more relevant and meaningful to our various sectors and communities, this is a fantastic share of ways on exactly how that could be done. We have just a few minutes, so I'm going to ask just one last question each to Krishna and Kudrat, which is, Kudrat, as you work with the youth, you've made this focus on our youth. How do you see the building of this knowledge base with and skill set with our youth? How do you see that impact the future of the larger dispute resolution movement in our country?
So Tara, I would start with an undisputed fact that youth are more than 50% of India's population, right? So there is no way that change is going to be possible in a big way if youth are not involved and youth are not leading it. And I see, of course, there are so many startups around in the field of ODR led by youngsters doing great work. Yes, ODR is important, online dispute resolution, but I think the future of this movement is ODP, which is online dispute prevention. And I see youth have the potential to use technology, their skills, and connect communities at large to make this happen. In fact, at YCM, we've started something called the Conflict Management Virtual Addas, where these youth who've been trained with techniques are now reaching out to people in their communities, in their networks, and holding these addas to engage in conversation. And it's also important to reach out to diverse youth, right? So dispute resolution skills and dispute prevention skills are life skills for all. It's not just for law students, law professionals, or the law field. For there to be a cultural change, we have to involve youth and citizens from across sectors.
Well said. Absolutely. ODP is the way to go. I like that. Krishna, last question to you. What would you consider as we work? I know this is a work in progress. It's a young project for all practical purposes. But that said, we still have a vision. When we talk about that muscle, where do you see, or what would you consider an ideal situation to be able to say, yes, we have built that muscle?
Wow. That's a tough one, Tara. I don't know when we're going to be able to say we have built that muscle. I think what I'm just going to take the liberty of sharing instead is how we're trying to build that muscle. And Uncommon Ground works basically on three broad ideas. Our first, foremost, our core activity or core perspective is capacity building. And the capacity we intend to build is a little wider, more broadly defined than saying being able to resolve conflict. It is, as Kudrat also says, to be able to prevent conflict, preempt conflict, even be able to address any problematic situation, any situation of scarcity, to come up with ideas or solutions that are based in value creation. So the core of a lot of our work is in that kind of delivering that capacity across, inculcating that capacity across a very diverse range of audiences through our workshops and similar initiatives. The second, of course, is that we believe it's very, very important that something like this, like every muscle, it has to be used in order for it to go stronger. So we believe that any amount of capacity building is only as good as the amount of practice support that is going to go behind it. So the second focus of our work is to be able to practice, is to be able to support different individuals, organizations, practices, communities with practicing what we call the dialogic method towards addressing the various situations that they are faced with. And then the third and more slightly longer term, but very, very fulfilling aim here is to be able to build a community of co-practitioners, of a community of interest and practice who then support each other so that, well, we're out of our jobs really in a matter of some time. So yeah, maybe that's my answer to your question, Tara. When is our job done? When we're no longer needed?
Perfectly answered. Now help us understand, actually, our audience understand, which are the kind of groups that you have been working with, say, over the past year? Where have you been able to take these initiatives?
We have been able to, and thanks for this, because I just noticed a similar question in the Q&A box on this, on some of the work we do. So thanks for giving me the chance to address that. We actually have worked with a diverse range of stakeholders, from social sector organizations that work with the government, that engage in policy lobbying, engage in policy initiatives, to through organizations that deal with rural women in places like Hintal in Karnataka. We are now in the process of working with caseworkers who deal with domestic abuse survivors in West Bengal. So we're also hoping to be able to work with a group of migrant workers on an initiative that's being put together. So it's really very, very diverse in terms of whether you talk about application, language, skill set, audience. And what we try and how we go about this is that our broad frameworks are the same no matter which group we wish to address. What we end up modifying in order to suit the partners we work with is the mode of delivery. To this extent, the other thing that's also been very, very exciting for me personally about this whole project is having had to develop very India-specific, culturally, contextually relevant material, including, totally new frameworks like what we call our dialogue tree, or coming up with cases which are about Sita and Geeta and Rani and Reena. But, I'm just sort of really just putting it into a nutshell here. But to be able to come up with material that draw on what is a very, very globally rich discipline, but to be able to bring it to material that is culturally contextual, locally relevant, as well as accessible at any and every level of audience, is what we have been trying to do all this while. And okay, I'm going to stop now because I know I'm getting very excited about our work.
No, but there you have it. This has been fantastic in giving our audience a sneak preview into the amazing diversification of traditional ADR, ODR based work. So thank you all for sharing your wonderful experiences. This is as part of the mediation movement. CAMP, of course, focuses on high value commercial disputes, and it's extremely exciting to see a dispute that has been in court for the past 15 years resolve in a matter of few days at CAMP. But it's equally exciting for me personally to be involved in the Uncommon Ground project, where we are actually working on changing mindset, changing behavior, through empowering people with knowledge and skill sets. So exciting time to be part of the movement. And as Shloka said it, we're all collectively excited to be able to look back at a point of history and say we were part of that. So thank you all for being part of that movement.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you, Krishna, Santosh ji, and Kudrat. That was a really exciting session. And honestly, I think that we couldn't have ended day 5 and ODR week with a better panel than this. It shows us all the societal muscle that we need to build, and how can we approach dispute resolution, dispute prevention. And this is a lot more than just financial disputes or lok adalats and this and that. It's a lot more, right? And thank you to everyone in the autonomy group who've co-built this agenda with us, giving us feedback and helped us contribute to it. Thank you to all the participants who've tuned in every day and who've participated so actively and taken this leap of faith and this journey of ODR with us. I would like to end with again requesting everyone to join Autonomy. We will email you with the links to Autonomy. You can play different roles, right? Awareness around ODR, mediation, etc. How can you, even including ODR clauses and contracts, for instance, and mediation clauses and contracts. You could train to be a mediator, arbitrator. You could start an initiative the way Kudrat has when she had a change of heart after practicing in courts. So there is so much that all of us can do, and we look forward to you being a part of it. So thank you. We're very excited for where the journey will take us.
Thank you, Kirtana. Thank you, Agami.
Thank you, Kirtana.